показывает Москва. Работают все центральные каналы телевидения. Смотрите и слушайте Москву.
Workers of the world, unite. This slogan is the call of the Soviets, the greatest superpower of the 20th century, to the workers of the world. The 20th century is the century of the greatest wars in human history. I'm going to tell you the story of a superpower that was founded in this century, developed in this century, and destroyed in this century. Union of Soviet Socialist Republics. On February 19, 1915, the Allied Navy of 101 pieces attacked the Dardanelles Strait to break the resistance of the Allied states and to capture the straits belonging to the Ottoman Empire, in order to help the Russian Tsarist allies, who were in difficulty due to the Bolshevik rebellions. According to their predictions, the Dardanelles and then the Bosphorus Strait would be seized before the weak Ottoman Empire could resist. Thus, the Ottoman Empire would be destroyed and the Allied army that crossed the strait would deliver aid to the Russian Tsar via the Black Sea. But that's not how it happened. The Turkish resistance broke all accounts and the Allied forces were defeated in the Dardanelles land and sea wars. Help for the Russian Tsar couldn't go. Thus, the Russian Tsar could no longer stand the increasingly powerful Bolsheviks. On October 25, 1917, the Bolsheviks, led by Vladimir Lenin, destroyed the Tsarist regime. Since then, a civil war has begun on the territory of the Russian Tsarist. As the Bolsheviks quickly took over the country, a resistance movement called the White Army emerged against the Bolsheviks, led by pro-Tsarist commanders such as Alexander Kolchak, a Russian Tsarist general of Turkish origin, Anton Denik, general of the Russian Tsarist Empire, and General Pyotr Vrangel. After the establishment of the Union, religion and state affairs were separated. Women have been given new rights. The Russian Tsar was made up of different nationalities. However, the Russians were considered superior to all other peoples and were defined as the ruling people. When the Soviet Union was founded, this status was abolished by Lenin's ideas against Stalin, who wanted this to continue. The peoples established their own autonomous republics of the Soviet Union and were placed on an equal footing with the Russians. Then, the economic program designed by Lenin for the development of the country, called the New Economic Policy NEP, was implemented. Within the framework of the policy implemented in 5-year plans, the land of feudal landowners was taken and nationalized. Then, the ownership of these lands was given to the hydroponic farmers on the condition that they belonged to the state, and agricultural production was increased. Not content with that, Lenin also cared about industrialization. For this purpose, Russia nationalized factories belonging to foreigners from the Tsarist period. In addition to these factories, new factories have been established all over the country. But Lenin knew that supporting these factories in agriculture was through energy investments. For this purpose, various power plants, especially hydroelectric power plants, started to be built in many parts of the country. These moves quickly recovered the Soviet economy. In the political sphere, Lenin, who believes that the security of the socialist revolution is the spread of socialism to other countries, has not hesitated to support socialist workers' movements in countries fighting against imperialism in various countries. As a result of these policies, similar revolutions occurred in countries such as Mongolia and China. Countries that fought for independence against imperialist powers, such as Turkey and India, cooperated for common purposes. Lenin thus thought that socialist revolutions would be in place. In these countries, during the Russian Tsarist period, literacy was around 20%. Only a certain elite could get an education. The Soviets began their educational moves to beat the low literacy rate and increase the literacy rate to 100%. Due to the influence of economic policies, a significant share of the rapidly increasing income was allocated to education, and education was made free in the country. In 1922, Lenin's health began to deteriorate, and he printed his famous notes, which were considered wills. In his notes, he described the positives and negatives of his fellow Communist Party struggles and issued repeated warnings against intra-party strife. In particular, he noted that the powers of Joseph Stalin, who was elected party secretary general, should be reduced. Lenin, who laid the foundations of the Union of Soviet Socialist Republics and established the first and largest socialist state in the world, died on January 27, 1924. The Stalin era had begun. After Lenin's death, the country was ruled by the Troika, the collective power it wanted for a while. At first, there was an attempt to show unity and solidarity, but the internal party rivalry could not be hidden from the public. Because there was a power struggle between Stalin, the People's Commissioner of Nationalities, and Lev Trotsky, the leader of the Red Army, there were disagreements, especially with the NEP, the economic policy to watch. Stalin initially played the role of referee, providing extensive support, and later brought his own supporters to important positions. Consolidating his power, Stalin sent Trotsky into exile in Kazakhstan, taking full power. In 1924, a new constitution was adopted. The first 5-year development plan was created in line with the NEP. Within the framework of this plan, 4,500 factories and 9,000 industrial facilities were established. Feudal landowners were suppressed, and the people were allowed to farm the land, which was owned by the state. Tractors were bought from England, and modern agriculture was introduced. Collective farms were established. A number of land-rich grassroots groups called Kulak started a rebellion movement in Ukraine, looting tractor stations and collective farms to prevent these moves in agriculture. But this movement was violently suppressed, and economic policies continued. As a result, the 5-year targets were reached in 4.5 years, and the Soviet Union grew 12-fold to become one of the world's 3 largest economies by 1941. While all this was happening in the Soviet Union, war footsteps were heard again in Europe. The Hitler-led Nazis, who seized power in Germany, began to threaten Europe's security. In 1939, the Soviet Union entered into a non-aggression treaty with Germany. This deal has made Britain, France, and America very uncomfortable. However, this was because France and the United Kingdom made the Munich Treaty with Germany in response to the Soviet Union's support for labor movements in capitalist countries. This shocked the Soviets. Because this treaty allowed Germany to invade Czechoslovakia, the Soviet Union pursued a policy of friendly relations with capitalist countries and received assurances from them about borders. This treaty meant that the guarantee was broken. The Soviet Union also wanted to secure itself by signing a non-aggression pact with the Germans. Soviet generals warned Stalin not to trust Hitler, but Stalin ignored these warnings. That's why he didn't take any military action against the Nazis. Hitler unexpectedly launched Operation Barbarossa on June 22, 1941, without declaring war on the Soviet Union. The Soviet Union was caught off guard by this attack. The Nazis launched the campaign, especially in the summer, and entered into Russia. The Germans had the support of Catholics and former land-rich families in Ukraine, and the war wasn't getting any better for the Soviets. Hitler wanted to take Moscow. The Nazi army soon came before Moscow and Leningrad, but the Russians managed to establish a line of resistance here. As the Russians resisted, time passed and the seasonal conditions worsened. In the end came the winter season, which always helped the Russians the most in the occupations. Adding to that the inexperience of Nazi officers, the Nazi army was defeated. The eastern front of the Axis states had collapsed. Stalin ordered the Red Army to enter Berlin, and eventually the Red Army troops entered Berlin with the troops of the Allied states. Germany lost World War II. After this war, the Soviet Union made a treaty with America and the United Kingdom, dividing Germany in two. Under the control of the East German Soviets, West Germany became a satellite state under the control of the United States and the United Kingdom. After World War II, the Soviet Union lost 27 million of its people in the war. The losses were appalling. The Nazis had damaged 32,000 industrial plants in the Soviet Union. Under the leadership of Stalin, the Soviet Union implemented the Fourth Five-Year Development Plan to regroup. During these years, socialists came to power in Czechoslovakia, Bulgaria, Hungary, Yugoslavia, Albania, East Germany, Poland, and Romania with Soviet support. After China and North Korea turned toward socialism, the USA began to see socialism as a threat, and the Cold War began. Western states against the Soviet Union established NATO under the leadership of the USA. The Soviet Union formed the Warsaw Pact against NATO. The Soviets, who gave priority to machine production in the Fourth Five-Year Economic Plan, recovered their economy in a short time. With the opening of virgin lands to agriculture, the Soviet Union again became a world giant in the fields of industry and agriculture. During his time, Stalin abandoned Lenin's softer policy towards other nations and dissidents and had millions of people either exiled or executed. Stalin, who ruled the country with an iron fist, chose Suslov, who had no ambition for power and did not strive for it, as the person who would come to power after him. Stalin died on March 5, 1953. After Stalin's death, Suslov was unable to seize power and power passed into Khrushchev's hands. Khrushchev began to follow a softer policy than Stalin. He freed most of the captives and brought back some exiled dissidents. Although there was an opposition movement against Khrushchev in 1956, this movement did not succeed. Khrushchev made very heavy criticisms of Stalin at the Party Congress in 1956. He began to establish good relations with the capitalist states. However, the Communist Chinese administration began to criticize this attitude of the Soviets. Although Khrushchev tried to establish good relations with the capitalist states, he continued to develop policies against the USA. The Soviet Union has become one of the superpowers in the world with its success in economy. Economic development also showed itself in the scientific field, and the Soviet Union started the space age. Soviet cosmonaut Yuri Gagarin became the first human in space. With these scientific achievements, the Soviet Union showed the world that it was one step ahead of the Soviet Union. During this period, Suslov accused Khrushchev of personal hostility to Stalin and abuse of power. Suslov called for Khrushchev to resign, citing these. Thereupon, the Supreme Soviet Assembly dismissed Khrushchev from his post. Thus began the Brezhnev era. During the Brezhnev period, the Eighth Five-Year Development Plan was implemented. Development plans. The USSR became one of the two superpowers economically in the world. During this period, great successes were achieved in the economic, cultural, and scientific fields. The USSR aimed to keep the people away from luxury consumption. However, the state determined the prices of basic foodstuffs in the country, so there was no inflation in the country. By the 1970s, the USSR had reached the peak of its power. It competed with the USA in every field. Against the European Union, he established the economic organization called COMECON. With the socialist countries in Europe, cultural developments were also happening rapidly. The emphasis was on cinema, with Lenin's statement that cinema is the most important of the arts. During the Brezhnev era, the Soviet Union was gradually increasing its influence. Socialists came to power in Afghanistan with the support of the USSR. However, the USA confused the country by supporting many organizations such as the Taliban in Afghanistan and went on the offensive to overthrow the government. The socialist Afghan government asked the USSR for help. The Soviet Union invaded Afghanistan in 1979, but the economic cost of this invasion was heavy for the Soviets. Western states had constantly provided weapons to the Afghan insurgents. The war dragged on and the Soviet occupation lasted 10 years. The Brezhnev era had passed into Soviet history as a period of stability in general. However, the death of important figures of the Politburo in 1980 had a significant impact on politics. After Brezhnev, there were several managerial changes in a row. After the death of Suslov, who directed the policy, a young named Gorbachev came to the task. Gorbachev, who came to power in 1985, started to implement the restructuring policies called Glastnost and Perestroika. However, These policies resulted in the dissolution of the Soviet Union within 6 years. In order to prevent disintegration in the country, a referendum was called for the Autonomous Republics of the USSR. 12 out of 15 autonomous republics responded positively. The result was in the direction of loyalty to the Union. Thereupon, the republics were called to make a treaty again. However, while a few states in Eastern Europe did not respond positively to this call, the administrators of other autonomous republics, on August 19, 1991, members of the army, led by KGB chief Vladimir Khrushchev, tried to stage a coup. However, a group led by the head of the Russian Federative Socialist Republic of the USSR, Boris Yeltsin, suppressed the coup. Increasing in popularity, Boris Yeltsin took down the USSR flag from Red Square and hung the Russian flag, which was used in the past, on the square. It was a declaration of independence, one after the other. Upon these events, the Supreme Soviet Assembly dissolved the Union, and the USSR was officially dissolved. Thus, the most powerful state of the 20th century was involved in the dusty pages of history. Don't forget to like and subscribe for the rest of the content.